Hey friends, it's Laura with Laura's Handmade Haven. Welcome or welcome back. I'm so glad you joined me today. This is a video in our upcycling series for that vintage quilt that I cut up a few weeks ago. So this is going to be one of our framed art blocks. Now this is an idea that I actually did a play on this for my siblings and family members with some blocks that my grandma had. After she passed away, I inherited a really nice stack of quilt blocks that she hadn't put into a quilt and hadn't done anything with. And so I took those and framed them for my siblings. And it was really a quick Christmas idea, or it could be an any occasion idea, really. So what we're going to do today is take one of our Dresden blocks and we're going to cute it up a little bit, and then we're going to frame it into an LP album frame. So come join me at the craft table and I'll talk you through some of the things that you can do, and I'll demonstrate a few things that I'm going to do to this block just to make it a little more special and a little more crafty before you just throw it into a frame. Those of you that have watched my channel for a while, you probably remember that I started this kind of with the idea of just doing cross-stitch stuff every episode, and it's just kind of evolved into something more to really reflect what I really do in my craft space, which is really a wide variety of crafts. I do have quite a collection of anchor floss that's on the spools, and so I have those sitting on my table today because we're going to add some basic embroidery stitches to this cute little Dresden plate just to kind of doll it up. It's going to be kind of a play kind of on a crazy quilt, but I'm not going to be adding anything too crazy to this. I'm not going to get too excited about my embroidery stitches, but just a few little simple stitches just to doll this up a little bit. I'm using a pretty big needle because I want to be able to get all 6 strands of the embroidery floss through the eye without losing my mind. The one thing that I like about this project is because I don't necessarily need to try to work my way in between the layers or anything. It's going to be in a frame, so you don't have to worry about the back, what the back looks like. All right, so I do have a little bit of fraying right here, so I think what I'm going to do is just do kind of like a little blanket stitch on a couple of these little Dresdens. Now you could totally put this into a hoop, and that might actually be a really good idea, but I'm not going to worry about that today. I am just going to start pretty close to the center here. And I'm just going to do a very basic blanket stitch. So if you haven't done a blanket stitch before, I basically just started down here and then I went over here and I came up in the middle here just to kind of pull that over. And now all I have to do is come down and, you know, I just kind of guess. I go about 1 centimeter apart, and you're going to go down and up in a straight line. And then you're going to do the same thing. You're going to go down and up in a straight line. And you're going to start to see that little blanket stitch edge emerge. Now I am going to stop right here, mostly because I have an idea. So let me get one more stitch in. All right, and then I'm just going to go right back down here. And I'm going to tie a knot on the back. Again, because you're not going to see the back of this, you don't have to worry about hiding your knots or anything, because it is going to be in a frame once we get done with it. I'm going to run this in just to get that tail in there. Just to kind of help secure that knot. Now, instead of, now I did a little hand embroidery, right? But you know that I am more of a machine stitching girl. So now that I have my little bit of hand stitching in there, I'm going to take this to the machine and do some more stitching around, and we'll make this really, really cute. So a lot of us have sewing machines that have a ton of decorative stitches and we rarely use them. Well, for these little framed art projects, this is a perfect time to use some of those stitches. You can switch colors of your thread. You can stay with one color of thread. It's whatever you want to do. You can add as much or as little as you want. I'm probably going to add, I don't even know. I'm just going to go until I am happy with it, basically. So I'm going to start with just running some little floral stitches right around from where I stopped with my green, from where I started and stopped with my green hand stitching, just to get a little bit of a flower going in there. So if I look at this, I have lots of different flowers to choose from, but I really like this one down here. So that's what I'm going to do. Now I do have my clear presser foot on and I have set it to be a continuous design so it won't just stop with just one. And we're just going to start right here where I ended with the green. And I'm going to use my presser foot as my guide. There's a little triangle in the middle of this. I'm going to keep that right on the edge or right on the line of where this middle of the Dresden is with the center. And I'm just going to stitch on some flowers. And you can switch colors as many or as few times as you want. This is where you just kind of let your creativity go, right? And you can kind of just add different types of stitches, different types of techniques. I'm not going to end with just hand and machine embroidery either. I have a couple other things in mind that I'm going to do with this as well. So let's get the rest of my machine embroidery done, and then we'll move on to the next step. The last thing I'm going to do with our little framed art block before we trim it up and actually frame it is I'm going to add some additional trims to it. I'm also going to add some beads, but I don't want to have to hand bead every one of those little things on there. And I don't want to actually have to sew on all the trims either. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my hot glue gun and I'm going to glue some of these little things on different places on the quilt block. And really, when I look at this, this is the orientation that I want. This is the top, this is the bottom. So this is what it would look like in the frame itself. And I'm just going to use just some different little trims and glue those on into place, and then we'll do some beading, and then we will trim it up and get it into our frame. I'm not too worried about the edges, where the edges of the trim is going to be, as long as it's off the edge of the block that it is right now, mostly because we're going to trim this down. And we're going to trim it down to fit inside the frame. So as long as my trim is longer than my block, then I'm going to be good to go. All right, so if you're like me, a lot of times I get beads and then I don't really do much with them. So this is what we're going to do. We are going to kind of fill the middle of this with some glue. And we're going to grab a handful of beads and we're just going to sprinkle them over. We're going to want it pretty full in the middle here because we will obviously want to cover up all that glue. And we're just going to cover the middle of our flower with some beads. And that's going to be kind of like the seeds, right? The seeds in our flower. Press those into place. And you do want to, work quickly. I could have broken this up into segments and that probably would have been a better idea. But it doesn't take too long just to grab some beads and throw them on there and press them into place. I'm going to run a little more glue on top. And then we're going to take our Teflon mat and just press. It's going to press that glue down in between the beads. And get everyone secure. Now the glue that I'm using dries crystal clear. So once that's completely dry, you're not even going to see the glue in between those beads. You're just going to see the beads on the cloth. All right, so we have two things left to do. We first want to cut a backing board for our quilt block, and we're just going to mount it onto this. Now this is not the rotary cutter that I use to cut out my quilt pieces. This is a rotary cutter I use for craft projects like this. I just happen to have this board left over from another project, but basically you need a 12.5-inch square for both the quilt block and the backing board. And this is actually pretty close. I'm actually going to use the hot glue gun again and just hot glue this onto the backing board before we put it in the frame. Doesn't need a ton, just enough to hold it. The frame does have these nice little springs that will keep some pressure against it to keep it into the frame the way it needs to be. But I just want to be able to make sure it doesn't shift over time. All right, so now all we have to do is take our frame and let's remember which one is up. That's up. Place this in here. And then we'll place this in here and we will have a framed quilt block. All right, so you may be wondering, why would you do this? Why would I just frame a quilt block and why would I just do all this stuff and have a framed art quilt block? Well, one, because I like quilt blocks and I like framed art and I like fast, easy little projects to decorate my craft space. But another reason you might do this is maybe you have a quilt that is kind of in shambles and you don't want to get rid of it, and maybe you have siblings or friends or family that also are related to the quilter. This is one good way to divide up a quilt and let everyone have a piece of their legacy with a quilt that isn't really good for using anymore. It's also a fun way just to decorate your craft room. So it's a really fun, quick project. You can make it as complicated or as simple as you want. I could have definitely just stayed with just the Dresden plate and just framed just the quilt square and went with just that. I wouldn't have had to add any of those decorative stitches with the machine. I wouldn't have had to add the trims with the glue. I just wanted to show you and give you a wide variety of things that you could do, that you could enhance your quilt blocks for framing. But you know, maybe you don't do all of these in your project, or maybe you do more. So let me know in the comments below, what else would you add to this project? What would you like to see added to this one? What other techniques have you tried? Have you done anything else? Have you done any framed quilt blocks? So I would love to hear from you. In the description box below, you're going to find a few links to some products that I've used today, just in case you're interested in getting some of your own. So until next time, find joy in all you do, carve out some time for crafting and creating, and remember, it's always better when you make stuff up.